Well, today we are privileged to have a guest speaker here. I guess I should say, if you're in junior high, you've probably already released yourself, but if you have not, you are free to go to your class now if you're in junior high. We are honored to have Deb Smith with us presenting this morning. She is a longtime resident of Fairfield County, married with 2 children and 4 grandchildren. She has a psychology degree from Ohio University, a degree in physical therapy from the University of Minnesota, master's degree in education for Virginia Tech. She practiced as a physical therapist for 26 years and taught at the college level for 20 years. And her current title is Chronic Volunteer. And she presents Bridges Out of Poverty throughout Ohio. I actually got to see some of her remarks on Bridges Out of Poverty when I was at a school event through Art of Neighboring. We were giving donuts and different things away, and I think thank you cards. It was the time we did all the thank you cards to all the employees, and I was at one of the junior highs when she began her talk, and I was only able to stay a few minutes because I had to go to the next place. And so I thought right then, I need to invite her to church and have her speak for no other reason so I can hear the rest of the talk. And so, no, seriously, when I've seen her parts of her presentation and others that have seen her, they've just commented on how it helps open our minds up to poverty and what people who are in poverty go through, whereas sometimes we don't think through that. I thought as we're going through a series, and we're wrapping that series up today, called Open-Handed, Engaging in Compassionate Ministry, it would just be really good for us to get some more in-depth training and to hear something from a totally different perspective that I think would help all of us understand poverty a little better. And just looking through some of her notes and some of the things that she's prepared, I would just tell you to prepare to be challenged, as well as I think to have some aha moments. I think we're going to have several aha moments as she presents. So, Deb, if you'd come up here, we usually pray for another church before we do our sermon, but today let's all just pray for Deb. Would you just give a warm Vineyard welcome for Deb? And if you want to extend a hand of encouragement towards her, and we're just going to say a quick prayer for her. Jesus, I thank you for Deb. I thank you for the ministry that she has and how she serves people, and how your heart is pleased that she is a chronic volunteer at this stage of her life, that you have told us to give generously to others. And Lord, you've poured a lot into her over her lifetime, and she's able to give that knowledge and experience and training out to other people. And so we thank you for her work. We pray a blessing on her. I pray that the Spirit of the living God will fill her up right now, and you would use her as she presents this material to us. Let us be challenged and stretched, and let us have many aha moments. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your warm welcome. I was greeted as I came in today, so I almost feel like I'm at home as I speak to you this morning. Let's have the first slide, please. And while that comes up, I want to tell you that these words are actually not my thoughts and my ideas. This program, Bridges Out of Poverty, is an international program that was developed 30 years ago by a teacher named Ruby Payne, who taught near Findlay, Ohio. And what she noticed was that some of the children in her classroom weren't able to learn in the same way as she had been trained to teach. And she began to think about the differences between individuals who live in what we call poverty and people who live in the middle class, and how that changes the way they perceive the world and how it changes the way they are perceived by us. Now, as the pastor said, what I'm going to try to do today in a very short period of time, because this is supposed to be a 3-hour speech and nobody wants to stay that long, right? I've got great jokes and I'm very entertaining, but not this morning. So we're going to do this in about 30 minutes to get through it. And that means I'm going to hit some of the highlights here. But if you're interested in these concepts, there are lots of places you can find more information. One is ahaprocess.org. That's ahaprocess.org on the internet, or you can Google search Ruby Payne, because in our lives now, everything's on Google, right? You just go to Google whenever you want to know anything. My grandchildren say to me, Grandma, we don't need you as much as we used to, because now we can go to Google. And by the way, not only does your hearing aid need more batteries, but we think your brain needs a boost as well. That's what their comments were to me when we took them on a trip. So Ruby Payne started looking at poverty. And one of the things that the organization has done is spend a lot of time in research. So the things that I'm going to talk to you about today are not just her ideas, but they are concepts that have been proven and investigated from both a psychology and psychological perspective. I need to tell you, too, that these approaches have been very successful in many communities. Look no farther than Cincinnati as a great example of what a community could do to support those individuals who are lacking resources. All right, so before we get started, I want you to take 30 seconds, and I want you to think of 3 descriptors in your mind, 3 words that describe people in poverty. Okay, ready? Go. Just 3 words. Okay, that wasn't 30 seconds, so I lied about that. So how many of you said homeless? One of your words. How many of you said hungry? Yeah. How many of you said uneducated? Yeah. How many of you said drifting or lost? Words like that. All right. How many of you used words like resourceful, family-oriented, problem solvers? Aha. That is a problem. We have been conditioned in our language and how we frame our language to think about poverty in very negative, restrictive ways. That's how we think about it. That's how we're encouraged to think about it. I know some of you are as old as I am. I'm going to be 65 pretty soon, which my 8-year-old grandson said, "Now, how close is that to death?" Okay, so I know that some of you out there remember President Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, yes? And that was going to fix it all, right? We were going to take care of it. We were going to create social programs that took care of it. Not so much. And that's why we need to reframe the words we use, the way we perceive things, and think about poverty in a different way. Next slide, please. So I'm going to encourage you today, instead of thinking about those descriptors, to do something else. Because Ruby Payne says, if we keep those words in our head, they interfere with us understanding poverty. So what I want you to do is think about this new concept of a mental model, a way of creating a Lego structure, if you will, of what poverty really is. We have to suspend the things that we've been trained and that we think about poverty, and we have to embrace new ways of introducing it. Could I have the next slide? This is poverty. This is what it's like every day. Within that circle, and by the way, this was developed over the years by people in poverty who were asked to explain their experience. All of these things are an everyday challenge. All of them. Now, you'll look up there and say, "Hey, I'm in there too. I got some debt. There are issues with me in terms of food or childcare." But look at the whole picture. All of these things experienced every day by people in poverty. They are challenges of housing. How can I pay my rent? What happens if it goes up? What if they remove subsidized housing? Criminal justice system. My second husband is in prison and my boyfriend's going to go pretty soon. So police are no longer my friends. Food. Where to get it, how to get it. I was talking to Carolyn this morning, and food pantries are very integral for people in poverty. How many of you go to the grocery store every week and go, "Oh my gosh, how much has milk gone up?" What's cheaper, milk or sugary drinks? Absolutely, right? So we buy what's cheaper. Children. Now, in the poverty experience, children are a communal property. There's my cousin's kids, there are my kids, there are kids by my boyfriend, by my first husband, by my second husband. Children are communal property. So the worries are much far beyond what we consider a normal family structure. Entertainment. Now this bugs a lot of people. Bugs a lot of people when we talk about entertainment in poverty. And let's be honest, all of us have said to ourselves at one time or another, "Listen, they got 60-inch TV screens at home. They've got cable. They've got cell phones. Come on. Stop doing that. Put your resources where they need to go. If I have nothing positive in my experience, if I have nothing to offer my children, what's the one thing I might value? At least they got Netflix. So when they go to school, they can talk about the programs. At least they feel part of something with entertainment. Agency time. Any of you ever waited at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles? Anybody? Anybody here? Right. Do you remember that animated movie not too long ago about the rabbit? And they show up and there's a sloth waiting on them? Yeah, I see some laughs there. Funniest scene I've ever seen in my life. It was hysterical. If you haven't seen it, you really need to look that up. You can find it on Google. It's great because that consumes part of our day, right? And we get frustrated. Now imagine going to Job and Family Services, then a food pantry, then community action, and then 211 just to get through your day. Your whole day is consumed. And by the way, you fill out the same forms with the same questions every time you go. And you get frustrated. Clothing. Clothing in poverty is an expression of your personality. Now, I don't know about you. Like I told you, I'm old. But when I go to the grocery store and I see the pajamas and I see some jeans down to here, it takes everything within me to remember that I'm a child of God. Everything. Because I want to go right up to them and say, really? Seriously? This is offensive. But I don't. I control myself. Debt. All of us deal with debt. But my brother said it perfectly, who was a great guy, funniest man I ever knew in my life, worked at least 3 jobs every day of his life, and never got out of debt. Ever. He had a divorce early in his life, and he never got out of debt after that. And he used to say, you know, I used to worry about that a lot anymore, and I don't. I'll be poor when I die, and who's going to care? And that's a different way of looking at it than you might think. Transportation, huge problem for people in poverty, huge. We have some public transportation in Lancaster and Fairfield County, and it's very helpful, but it's never enough. It's not the right time. You have to anticipate it, and it can be very difficult. Family and friends, safety. Now, we don't often think about safety in our lives on a day-to-day basis, but we're challenged to do that more and more. Imagine if you're living in your car or if you're couch surfing. That becomes a real issue. Of course, jobs, healthcare, chemical dependency. We all know about the horrible scourge of drug addiction in our communities and around the nation. And mental health. That's the one that's seriously overlooked. You've been hearing a lot about that, right? Mental health and how there are a lot of people that need more mental health. Well, I've got some news for you. My son is an emergency room physician, and as you know, I practice as a physical therapist, so I'm in the medical community. We need so much more research in mental health. We need better drugs. We need better treatment. There's a crying shortage of psychiatrists. We have very difficult time recruiting them, even for our county. So yes, mental health is an issue, but we don't have the resources to deal with it. And when you're dealing with all these other things up here, do you think you might be a little stressed? Just a little? And what does stress lead to? High blood pressure, cardiac problems, diabetes, and by the way, your diet's not the best, right? So all of these things are enormous pressures, and I don't have the one thing in America that is glorified most often, that's money. I don't have it. So how do I solve these problems? I have to go to Job and Family Services tomorrow, because it's a requirement for me to keep my part-time job. I have to go see my counselor. I'm now taking care of my cousin's kids because she's temporarily incarcerated for a probation violation. What am I going to do with my kids? Anybody know of any free drop-in places around here where you can leave kids all day? How many of you pay child care for your jobs? Not cheap, right? So what am I going to do? Don't have money. How am I going to solve that? What's that word in the middle? Relationships. It's a barter system. Hey, George, you remember when I fixed your car last week, the transmission that I was laying down in the street for 2 days helping you fix? I need you to watch my kids today. Hey, Aunt Mary, I know you just got out of the hospital, you've got congestive heart failure, and you have a little bit of dementia. You're my best shot. Take the 4 kids to make sure they don't die. All right? That's how I solve problems, with relationships. My relationships are leveraged. Now, we in the middle class tend to think of that relationship word as a positive thing, right? If I have a relationship with you, you're my friend. You're in my family. There's something that bonds us. Doesn't have to be true. I can have a relationship with you because I got something on you. Hey, Gina, I know you're hiding your cousin in your basement. I know he's a sex offender, and he's not supposed to be in this area because it's too close to his school. Guess what you're doing this week? You're watching my kids. So relationships go both ways, but that's how we solve problems. There was one time in our history as a nation when this kind of barter system was celebrated. In fact, my grandparents told story after story about how they survived this time in history. Anybody remember what that might have been? The Depression. We were all barter back then, weren't we? My grandpa was an out-of-work coal miner, so he bartered. What he did is he went into the woods of Guernsey County, and with his knowledge, he collected herbs that a pharmacist could use to make medicines, like, for instance, foxglove, which is a gorgeous flower that is digitalis and helps with heart problems. So he would take those to the pharmacist and barter that for food. My mother, at the age of 7, milked 4 cows morning and night for the neighbor in exchange for milk and butter. That was celebrated back then. This idea of relationships hasn't always been negative in our history. And it's a very good way of solving problems if I don't have money. That's what poverty is, relationships. So throwing money into this should fix it, right? If you have all these issues that you're dealing with, all I need to do is give you money, correct? Has that ever worked? Did it work for Lyndon Johnson? Is it working now? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to that. There is a place for that. Support is needed. But it's not the answer. And it's wrong, in my opinion, this is my opinion, it's wrong to get mad at the people in poverty because that doesn't work, because money doesn't work. Their whole world is relationships. And let's be honest, so is yours. You get in real trouble, who do you call? Not the Ghostbusters, I know. But who do you call? Friends, family, pastors. You reach out to your church family. We're all dependent like this. Maybe not on a day-to-day basis for survival, but we're no different. Next slide, please. So superimpose on those relationships the things that you see at the bottom and the top. If you accept this mental image of poverty, where do social services fit in? Positive or negative? Both. Positive and negative. It's where I go to get a job. It's where I go to get some of the things I need, but it consumes my whole day. They ask me the same old questions, and sometimes I'm refused because somebody in Washington changed the rules, and nobody told me. What about schools? Positive or negative? Both. The one thing schools do for me is they relieve me of the pressure of taking care of my children, at least for certain hours during the day. Great babysitters, right? But they're also negative because there, my children are treated differently. My children don't have the clothes, they don't have the toys. All right, so how many of you out there know what a Switch is? Nintendo Switch, yeah? Right. Latest game, cannot get my grandkids off of it. And they love it. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there's something called Labo, which we just experienced. It's expensive, so only grandparents buy it, right? And what you do is it's a cardboard cutout thing that you make. You make a cardboard fishing rod And then you attach that electronic game to it, and a movie comes up, and you actually fish. You catch sharks, you catch shrimp, you catch all these kinds of things. Fascinating, wonderful. But if you're a child who doesn't have any of those things and everybody else is talking about it, that's a negative experience for you. And let me tell you another story about schools. Last year, I spent a lot of time in the Lancaster City schools, and I went to one elementary school. And I'm speaking to a group of teachers before their day starts, so I know they're anxious to get going, and I started this talk. And I look out in the crowd, and there are some teachers crying. And I'm like, oh boy, what did I do this time? Did I tell a bad joke? Did I offend somebody? What's happening? Is my shoe on backwards? What's going on? So I stopped, and I said, I don't understand. I'm really sorry. I see some tears in the room. And one of the teachers stood up, and she said, it just dawned on us what we're doing. We teach first grade. And when our children come to our class and they have not had their parents sign their bookie bag, you know what a bookie bag is? They go home with the reading material and you have to read it to your parent and your parent signs and you bring it back. Well, if they don't have a parent's signature, we take recess away from them. And it tends to be the same kids. It just dawned on us, they may not have a parent home that night. And if they do, that parent is consumed with finding food, visitation at jail, working out where they're going to live or sleep tonight. Why haven't we seen that before? So the next day, they recruited some grandparents to come in and read with those children who didn't get their bookie bags signed, and they made a pact to each other that nobody ever misses recess. Little thing. Building a relationship, looking at poverty a different way. See those businesses at the bottom? Would you consider all of those positive? No. But for many people, those are their options. Those are their options. The dollar store, I go there all the time, used car lots, temp services, check cashing. Now, we recently in this state passed a law, didn't we? And we're still working on it to limit how much interest they can charge on those check cashing places. Well, I'm in a group called Sharing Hope where I meet with families in poverty who are working hard to better themselves. And one of the guys pulled me aside one day and he goes, well, you screwed it up for us again. I'm like, what? What did I do? He goes, well, you limited the check cashing places. He goes, that's the only place I can go to get cash sometimes. I know what they do, but I've got this figured out. I pay them back in time. I borrow from friends. Now I can't get that cash and I'm more strapped because nobody asked the people who are using them what would work. Police, positive and negative. Negative if you're after me, positive if I want you to be after somebody else. What do you think about that other one, religious organizations? How do they fit? First of all, they're often the only family that groups have. They offer food. They offer comfort. They offer another way to look at the world and a way to be accepted. But sometimes they can be exclusionary. So it just depends. Next slide, please. The one thing that you might think about that you can do that's so important is housing. Housing, we know from research, is the engine that drives poverty. If I don't have a place to live, everything else falls apart. That's the critical thing. So when you hear discussions about housing, think about that, because without proper housing, it's very difficult to address this problem. Next slide, please. This is middle class. This is what most of us consider ourselves to be. Not going to spend too much time here. You can read there. But what's the word in the middle? Achievement. It's not relationships. You go to a picnic, you go to a party, what's the first thing you say to people you don't know? Hi, where do you work? Where'd you go to school? Where do you live? It's all about achievement. Not necessarily bad, not bad, but a different perspective on the world. So think about that. Then if you meet someone in poverty and you say to them, where do you work? What am I going to say? I'm in between jobs. I don't have a job. I'm a felon. I can't get a job. So you then become one of those. And I avoid you. And I'm angry because you put me down. You didn't establish a relationship with me. You didn't ask me my story. You didn't know who I am. And all of a sudden, I feel judged. That's middle class. But again, I'm making generalizations. We're all good people, right? And these achievements are important, and we should be proud of them. But it's a different way of looking at the world. Next slide, please. So the summary of that then is the experience of poverty puts you in the tyranny of the moment. I can't plan my future. I can't think about college for my kids. I can't think about tomorrow. I have to solve my problems today. And if you're not going to help me solve my problems today, or if you can't do that without judgment, then I don't need you. The healthier you are in your mind, the healthier you are, the more things are in place, the more needs are met, then the less you may seem to need to change, but the more you can change. So having a house gives you freedom to change. Having food gives you freedom to think differently. Having clothing that you can wear, having transportation, then those problems are behind you and you can envision the future. If that's not true, you live in the tyranny of the moment. There is no future. There is no getting out. There is only dealing with my problems today. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk to you about some hidden rules. We in society have hidden rules. You all have hidden rules. You have hidden rules about Thanksgiving dinner. Other people may not understand that in your family, no one eats Aunt June's oyster dressing. Nobody. Nobody says it. You just don't do it. We all have hidden rules. In poverty, I believe in fate. Can't change it. Nothing I can do matters. You know why I believe that? Because life has taught me that. No matter how I plan, it doesn't get better. In middle class, we believe in choice, and therefore, we tend to judge people who don't make good choices. My husband and I just took 8 days in an RV and took 4 grandchildren ages 13 to 8 to Disney World. Thank you. We survived with lots of prayer and lots of patience. And our watchword of the day was, make good choices. Tanner, do not chase that lizard. Make good choices. Dylan, stop going into the gift shop. Make good choices. We have the freedom to make choice. People in poverty don't feel that way. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about punishment. When I grew up, there were 2 kinds of punishment. In the wintertime, it was a belt, and in the summertime, it was an apple switch with leaves on the end. Anybody relate? Yes. Now, I don't do that now. Want to, but don't. Okay? So, in middle class, we believe that's effective. In poverty, they believe I'm fated or destined. Doesn't make any difference what I do. It's all going to turn out the same. I'm still not going to be anywhere. So I'm going to do what I want to do, and if I don't get caught, it's great. And if I do get caught, I deny it. And then when I deny it and they find out that I've been lying, they'll punish me and I'll be forgiven and we'll do this again. That's the pattern. It just is. Because what's most important is the relationship between that parent and that child. Next slide, please. Love. In poverty, love and acceptance is conditional. It's based on your behavior. It's based on who you're related to, and it's based on what you can do for me, because everything is a leveraged relationship. And in middle class, it's conditional based on achievement. If you get a good grade card, I'll buy you that new game for the Switch. If you behave properly, then we get hugs. Up above, love and acceptance is not based on your behavior. It's based on who you are, how entertaining you are, or what good you can do me in the family structure. Next slide, please. Personality. In poverty, it's for entertainment. I'm funny or I'm the tough guy. Those are the 2 ways to be successful. In middle class, your personality gets you somewhere. People like you. You get promoted. You have achievement. Next slide, please. Food. The key question in poverty, is there enough? Now, I don't know about your friends, but my friends complain all the time. I was behind those people in the grocery store line, and I saw what they bought. They bought snack cakes, they bought Kool-Aid, they bought all packaged foods. I don't know why that's not controlled. I don't know why we don't make them eat better. Why do they buy those things? Cheap. Easy. What if I don't have a stove tomorrow? Have to feed my kids somehow, and the best thing that ever happened to me was that dollar menu at McDonald's. Best thing that ever happened to me. In middle class, do you like it? How many of you have friends who go to a restaurant and the waiter serves the meal and they go, this is not medium well. This is well done. Please take it back and do it again, right? I want to say to those people, really, pull out your food thermometer. Prove it to me. But that's how we judge things. Next slide, please. Clothing. Clothing is valued for individual style and expression of personality, hence the pajama pants and the tattoos. Expression of personality. In the middle class, it's quality and acceptance. It's a lot more about the label that's in the back. Next, please. Education. Oh, this is a tough one to swallow. I know it is. If you ask anybody in this nation if education is important, they're all going to say yes. But people in poverty value it in the abstract. They know it's the right thing to do. They know it's the only way to get ahead. But remember, they're in the tyranny of the moment. They're having to solve their problems today. So if the issue is my 14-year-old goes to school or my 14-year-old stays home and takes care of the babies while I go try to find a job, that 14-year-old's staying home. It's an abstract issue. It's not really real. It takes enormous effort to achieve educationally in poverty. And for middle class, gotta have it, no question. You're going to school no matter what. My children maintain that I sent them to school where they almost were dying of illness because they had to go to school. Next slide, please. Humor. In poverty, it's about people, and in middle class, it's about situations. So oftentimes when we're hearing stories told, we think how mean or how unloving some of these stories are. But indeed, it's just a cultural difference. Next slide, please. Language. All right, 2 seconds on language. We know from studies started in 1937 that have been replicated until today that individuals who live in poverty or who live in situations where they don't have a lot of resources, children between the ages of 0 and 5, for every word spoken, for every 3 words spoken, 2 of those words are reprimands. So children in poverty learn language is dangerous. You don't trust it. You're more likely to get punished than to get rewarded. So behavior becomes what's more important. And in middle class, we speak like I'm speaking to you today, in proper sentences, with punctuation and with pauses. But in poverty, that's not the case. It's usually storytelling that's a little rambling. Next, please. Power. Power is linked to personal respect. I don't care what badge you have on, what uniform you're wearing. I don't care if you're head of a corporation. If I don't like you, if I think you're disrespecting me, you're out. In middle class, we sit up straighter because there's a teacher in the room. We pay more attention if there's a physician with a badge. Not so in poverty, not unless you have a relationship with me and I trust you. Next. Driving forces in poverty, and I can't say this enough, survival, relationships, and are you surprised by that last one? Entertainment. Do you know why? It's the only mental health break I get. It's the only mental health break I get. The only thing I can get that I can't not live without. I have to have it. And in middle class, it's work, achievement, and material security. Next slide, please. This is what drives people crazy in dealing with people in poverty. What I have done today is I started at A, I moved to B, and I'm moving to C at the end, which is coming soon. In in poverty, they tend to tell stories in circles. I mentioned my son was an ER physician, right? He works in Baltimore, Maryland. And his complaints over and over again until we talked about this pattern was how long it takes to get information out of people. So for instance, George comes in with a broken arm. If George is from middle class and the physician says, "Tell me how this happened to you," he goes, "Well, I was under my car and the jack failed and it fell on my arm, and that's why I have a broken arm." If you ask someone in poverty, they say, "Well, same thing happened to Aunt Sadie when she was 14. I don't know why everybody's making such a big deal about it. It took me 14 hours to get here. I had to find a ride. Nobody had a car that would work. Walked half the way. And then it didn't work out anyway. And the last time I talked to Aunt Sadie, her arm was still crooked." What? What now? Now, when I presented this to the emergency room department here locally at Fairfield Medical Center, I saw lots of aha bulbs go off. And one nurse couldn't help herself, and she jumped up and she goes, "Well, we can't do that. We can't take 30 minutes to figure this out. What do you suggest?" And I said, "Try this. Not based on my knowledge, but based on Ruby's pain. Get a piece of paper. Draw a line. Say, this was in the morning. What happened to you this morning? What happened right before the accident? What happened after the accident? Okay, let me tell you what's going to happen now." Give a pictorial review. Because remember, I don't trust words if I'm in poverty. So you have to show me. By doing that, you give me respect. You tell me where I've been and where I'm going. They're using that now, and I heard recently it's been very successful. The doctors are very grateful. Next slide, please. So, really, what we've said today, and to sum things up with one more issue after this, is that poverty isn't homeless, hungry, uneducated, hopeless, angry, resistant. All those things occur in poverty, but that's not what it is. Poverty is living without the resources you need. Those resources can be mental, spiritual, physical, all of those things, and yes, financial, economic, but that's not the only one. We all know people who have lots of money who are living in spiritual poverty. We know lots of people who are living in emotional poverty, who are struggling with family issues. That poverty is very real as well. When you think about poverty after today, think about it in terms of resources. What are they missing? Next slide, please. And here's another way to think about it, and here's where you come in. I love this. I solved lots of problems with this since I learned it. Take your hand. Your thumb are your physical resources. Some of us have physical challenges, so we wouldn't rate ourselves 5 on a 1 out of 5 scale. Your index finger is spiritual. What are your resources there? Your middle finger is emotional. No surprise, especially in traffic, right? So thumb, finger, middle finger is emotional. Your ring finger is mental. Do you have the skills you need? Can you think through things? Can you respond to problems? And your last, least important to your grip, least most likely, if somebody said, "I'm going to cut off one of your fingers," which one would it be? Always choose your little finger. You only use 10% of your grip if you don't have a little finger. Financial. That's a powerful message. Because in this country, everybody thinks poverty is about this. It isn't. It's about the lack of these resources. Now look at your palm. In the very center of your palm is the word bonding. That's where the people are that will support you no matter where you are on that resource list. These are the people you can call on all the time. They have the resources to help you. The circle outside that is bridging. This is when we reach out to others to help us with our resources. Teachings, schools, healthcare facilities, social services, churches, those are our bridges. You all can be a bridge. You all can learn more about poverty and think about how you can make a difference, how you can support the resources, not just of people in poverty, but people in your family, people that you love and that know you, people that you meet in the grocery store. What I've tried to do today is present to you a different way of thinking about a problem that Jesus faced and talked about. A problem that has been with us throughout humanity. But remember, it's also a way of life. And in this country, we say people have the freedom to live however they like. You can't take somebody from poverty and put them directly into middle class, because to do that, they have to break all those relationships that they depend on. If I said to you, you will never lack again with anything, the only thing you have to do is move to New York City and live in a Fifth Avenue apartment for the rest of your life. You can't see any of your friends and family. How many of you would do that? So is it fair to say to someone in poverty, I'm going to give you money to do everything you need, but you have to abandon everything you know, all your relationships? Of course not. Of course not. People need their relationships and they need their family. And the way that they choose to live needs to be respected. We all need help sometimes. But that help is not necessarily handing you a check or handing you some money. It's understanding you. It's making a relationship with you. It's being accepting of a different way of living this life and working together to build our resources. That's what Bridges Out of Poverty attempts to do. That's why I teach these courses. Because the way we think about poverty isn't working. We need to be better and do better, and we can. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to challenge you this morning and give you something to think about. Bless you all in everything that you do. And together, let's look at poverty differently. Read more, think more, get to know people in poverty. That'll help. And that's all we can do. Thank you.